let's look at 5 ways we can reduce stress every day. So first of all, we're going to talk for a few minutes about nutrition. Now, it's good, isn't it? Food falls into 3 categories. Food is either biogenic, biostatic, or bioacidic. And you think about what those words mean. So bios, it means life, right? Think about biology and biographies and all of those kind of things. For something to be biogenic, genetic comes from the root genesis. It's about creation. It's something new, right? And foods that are going to feed your cells and help you to make new cells and be vibrant and energetic, those are biogenic foods. Biostatic foods, we all know what static is, right? If there's static on your TV, what's happening? Nothing. So biostatic foods are things that aren't really messing with you, but aren't really helping you either, right? They're just sort of there, they're neutrals, it's okay. Bioacidic, when we think about things with the word "side" in them, we have homicide and pesticides and insecticides. Side is not good. We don't want to be eating foods that are bioacidic. Those are foods that are actually wrecking our system, right? So we think about 3 Ps. Any food that is processed, packaged, or prepared is something that is probably toxic to us on some level. And we tend to not think about things like nutrition as being stressful. We tend to think of stress as those big things, right? My work is stressful, my boss is stressful, my mother is stressful. All of those, I know, she's operating the camera, so I really should be nice. I'm
a peach.
Those are the things that we tend to associate as being stressors. But if something is actually working against your ability to create new cells, is that a stress in your body? It is, right? And there's been a lot of discussion in the nutrition world, at least lately, about the anti-inflammatory diets. And the anti-inflammatory diets, their whole point is to reduce inflammation, which is stress in the body. If you're eating foods that are creating less stress, guess what? Your overall body stress is going to go down. So the first time that I met Sam Gracie, I don't know if anybody's familiar with him, but when I first started working in the health field in the early 2000s, he had just put out a book called The Power of Superfoods, and he's the guy that created Greens Plus. So he was the one that really forwarded this whole green smoothie, superfood kind of movement. And I remember him saying, people always say, you are what you eat. But they tend to think of it in these sweeping, general kind of terms, like you are what you eat, so eat healthy, right? We don't tend to think of it as being something specific. So when you look at a meal, you need to look at it and go, do I want this to be my heart? Do I want this to be my brain? Do I want this to be my skin? Do I want this to be my hair? And you contrast that with something that looks maybe a little more like your hair and skin and everything should, because your body literally takes the ingredients from the food that you're eating and uses that to make new cells, right? Those are the ingredients. So looking at our food a little bit differently and thinking about what do we want to actually have become part of us, not just this meal that's transitory, not just this drive-through that's going to get us through so we don't have to cook when we get home. And I'm not slamming that. There are days, right? There are days when you need those things, but not making them habits, because this becomes us. Right? Inflammation and sugar. Now, this is really wordy. I'm sorry, and it's also in incredibly bad taste because this is me quoting me, which I really try not to do. But I had Health Action magazine ask me, I do some freelance work for them, and she told me that she wanted me to write an article about the toxicity of sugar for the fall issue. And the wording of that heading I found kind of interesting, like the toxicity of sugar. Like we don't know if sugar's bad for us, right? But toxic? That seemed a little bit extreme somehow. But then I started doing some research, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to talk about the toxicity of sugar, I don't want to talk about diabetes, I don't want to talk about weight, I don't want to talk about any of the stuff that people already know. I want to find out something new about why sugar would actually be considered toxic. And what I found out is basically that fructose, which we tend to think of as being part of fruit, but very little of the fructose we take in our diet anymore is from fruit, right? Mostly it's in the form of high fructose corn syrup or fructose that's been added to processed foods to make them taste good and give them some good mouthfeel. Fructose, unless you are actually really working out hard in your day, basically your liver just tends to turn it into fat and store it. Some of that becomes the very bad cholesterol that you see in your bloodstream. Some stays in the liver. This leads to fatty liver disease. Now, fatty liver disease is a collection of symptoms which used to only be seen in alcoholics. But the same way that we had to take adult onset diabetes and give it a new name because so many kids started having type 2 diabetes, they've actually had to rename this bunch of conditions and call it non-alcoholic fatty liver disease because so many people who don't drink are having this come up just purely from having too much fructose in their diet. Now, this bit in the blue, this is what freaked me out. The Canadian Liver Foundation estimates that almost 10% of children, this is Canadian children, not the American kids you see in the documentaries, Canadian children, now have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which will lead to serious health consequences. It has been found in children as young as 4. Can you imagine how much sugar is a 4-year-old eating that they have the liver of somebody who's been heavily drinking for the last 20 years? That's insane, right? So these are things that we need to actually look at a little bit and think about. Now, our chemistry doesn't help us with this, because when you've had a really crazy, stressful day, are you thinking, I'm gonna go home and have some broccoli? Yeah, I'm gonna have a big old bowl of salad, curl up in front of the TV. That's what I'm gonna do. No, right? When we're really stressed, our brain is after the hit that's going to make us feel a little bit better. And what gives us that hit? Bread, sugar, cheese, chocolate. Those are the things that give us that hit. Cheese actually hits opiate centers in your brain. Oh, cheese calms you down. Almost I got everybody going. More than chocolate. Women's number one craving is actually bread. Or chocolate. You know what bread does? When we eat bread, especially like those really awesome white fluffy things that were on the tables before, that look so good. When we eat bread, we have enzymes in our saliva that start breaking that down. That is turning into sugar before you swallow. And your brain is just going, it's so happy. So it takes work, because we are fighting against our chemistry, to eat well when we are stressed. But it sets up a much better cycle, in that we're eating well and then we're taking in the nutrients that we actually need to make good healthy cells, and we're not creating more stress within our body. So this is something that we have to make a conscious choice about.